ever heard of this word of Samyama? That's very normal. It's not really used much in the English vocabulary. But if it interests you, I highly encourage you to look at more formal definitions of what it is. In particular, Patanjali in the Yoga Sutra, he gave a nice definition of what it actually is. He gave that definition many thousands of years ago. Okay, but just in simple English, I would describe Samyama as learning words once again. Because as a baby or a young person, a toddler, we start to learn words and we use them like for utility. But what is their real deep, essential meaning? What emotions does it have? What sort of vibration does the word have? And on an abstract level, what is its true essence? Now, if you are into psychedelics and using them as entheogens, then that is a very useful practice in general that I highly recommend. If you are ever on psychedelics, you can pick any word really that is relevant to your life and just spend a good hour, or as long as you like, focusing on that one word very sharply, but feeling into what is that word, what's the meaning of it. And even if you're taking a visual psychedelic, you can even see how your visual landscape changes when you say a word. And it is very abundantly obvious that some words inspire beautiful visuals and beautiful feelings, whereas other words are contractive and inspire all sorts of negative visuals. Okay, so that's a very broad line introduction. But here today I'm going to propose a technique that I've been finding very, very useful into dropping into states of the great perfection. And the great perfection, I'm using that word here to roughly mean a sort of a state of samādhi, not the great samādhi, but a state of mental clarity where there are no thoughts going through the mind, and you just drop into an essentially deep bliss, a very deep peace. So how can we use this sort of samyama practice to drop into a deep peace? So usually I'm intending for this video to be more targeted towards a sober practice. If you are just meditating on a cushion, most of the time you will find that you are distracted by some or other thoughts, some or other monkey mind, and it will usually be sort of relevant to whatever is happening in your life at the time. And these sort of mundane thoughts can just be distracting and stop you from dropping into deep states of consciousness. Now, those distracting thoughts are not a problem ultimately, and you can use all sorts of meditation techniques, but today I'm going to be proposing one interesting meditation technique for you to do if you are wanting to drop into a deeper state. So the best way I think to describe how to do this is by taking an example. Let's say that you are stressed about work in general, and that's where your mind is going. You keep sitting in meditation, but you keep thinking about what you need to do tomorrow because your to-do list is so massive. Okay, that would be a very common example, but there can be many, many more. If your mind is getting lost in all sorts of thoughts about what you need to do tomorrow, the idea is to boil down this big story, this big distraction that the mind is coming up with, boil it down to one single word, because we want to drop all the content, we want to drop the story, and we want to get in touch with the emotion of it. So at first you might just be thinking about what you need to do tomorrow, but then you can start exploring words. What is the essence of what I am feeling here? Maybe you start with stress. Maybe you don't like the word stress. Maybe it's more anxious. Or maybe it's worry. But you sort of explore some words and find the one that essentially you are feeling right now. And if you can do this, the whole content, the whole story can drop away because you're getting to the core of the issue, the core of what you're feeling. So what I like about this technique is it's not denying your life situation. You're actually engaging with the life situation, but you're not getting lost in content, lost in thoughts. You are getting to the core essence of what you are feeling, and then you are focusing on that fully, very focusedly. And once you sort of get in touch. Let's say you come up with the word stress. You feel stressed about work. You just feel deep into yourself. What is stress? What is the emotion attached to it? How does it make my body feel? Maybe you can get some visuals about it. You just stay focused on that word, one word, that vibration of stress. And the trick here, the little game, the technique, is to notice when the word stress goes away, because inevitably this vibration of stress will vanish for whatever reason. Maybe it's because you get lost in thoughts again, or maybe it's because you have an emotional change and all of a sudden you feel happy, or maybe you just drop into some sort of a restful state. But no matter what, if you pick a word, stress, you ring it, it'll resonate because that's what you're feeling in that moment, for real, for genuinely, you're feeling stress. After some time, it will drop away. And noticing the transition from feeling stress to it dropping, that is the goal here. Because by noticing the transition, you can notice the impermanence of the stress word and the stress feeling, everything attached with the stress. And when you start to notice very perceptually, moment by moment, the impermanence, the transience of this stress, the whole story of stress also drops away, if that makes any sense. Now, that was one pretty long example, but it could be many, many things. For me, for instance, I can often get caught up in thoughts about my personal life, perhaps dating or whatever, and I can boil that down to one word, which is desire. And then you can feel like, what is a desire? What does it mean to want something? And then you just focus on that one word, the desire. Drop all the content and notice, because at some point, especially if you're sitting in something like double lotus, then the desire, that vibration will drop. And by noticing that, you can see that desire, although in one moment it feels so absolutely solid, the next moment it's gone. So again, by noticing this transience of the desire, the whole story behind the desire also becomes transient. It becomes wisp-like. It becomes like a ghost. It's no longer solid, it's just another coming and another going. And you can pick all sorts of emotions, obviously all sorts of words. I like this technique because it can be both positive and negative emotions, if you like that classification system. Ultimately, all emotions are fantastic and perfect. But if you're feeling angry, you know, you could have a story in your head about how bad someone else is and how much they did something wrong. You can drop that whole story and just focus on the word anger. Just the pure thought anger. Feel what are the visuals associated with it, what vibration does it have, and then notice the transience of the anger when it inevitably does drop away. So I think this is very nice for all the reasons I mentioned, but it has more benefits than just dropping down into the great perfection. If you're working with heavy sort of emotions, like I just mentioned, anger, this practice actually has a very strong kriya, purification aspect to it. You can see why, because usually, let's say you've got an anger towards someone, that anger is very solid or very thick. It's like a veil being in front of your eyes and you can't see through it. The anger is really convincing you that that other person is bad. But by feeling just the pure essence of anger without associating it to another person, and then by noticing the transience of the anger, it becomes wisp-like. You will still feel anger in the future, but the veil is no longer so thick. You can actually see through the veil. And when anger comes up, it becomes a good thing because it's a motivation to take action, but there is no longer this solid feeling that that person is bad. So in a real way, you've boiled away the power of the anger, and now it just becomes a natural, normal part of you being a human being, but you are more purified. You're no longer controlled by anger, you are free from it. And that's just one example. Any sort of negative or heavy emotion can undergo this process, and all sorts of abstract emotions can undergo this process. At the same time, however, you can use this to amplify positive and desirable emotions. For instance, beauty. Let's say you're meditating and the sun is setting. You might even be at the beach with some beautiful waves. Then you can drop, usually in those states of consciousness, you're not really in thoughts anyway, but you can come up with one word that is capturing all of what you're seeing. And let's just say that word is grandeur, okay? And then you can really feel that like a vibration, like a string being plucked. What does that mean? What does that feel like? Think back, pretend you're a child, like a 3-year-old child that is learning a new word. And you're thinking to yourself really deeply, what does that word grandeur mean? Well, it means exactly what you are feeling. That vibration, that resonance. Okay? And by feeling that so clearly, it makes it more easier for the mind in the future to resonate at that grandeur frequency. And if you use it in a sentence, you will notice that when you talk, all the words that you've done samyama on, they vibrate as you say them. So if you say, I saw a beautiful sunset that was full of grandeur, as you say that word, you resonate once again at that frequency. So this is a really interesting process, I find. If you get interested in it, like I am, very curious about it, you can almost re-sweep your entire vocabulary. Because just as a normal life process, of course, we learn the English language or whatever language you've learned. But by undergoing this process, we get a more deeper appreciation of the frequency, the vibration, the essence, the emotion behind these words that we use so commonly. And it can really change our vocabulary because we start to drop certain words that we don't appreciate the vibration of, the emotion of. Maybe swear words. I've noticed that for myself. Doing this samyama practice on cuss words. I still cuss sometimes. It can be funny for a joke, and sometimes it has a power to it, so you use it. But using it in daily life, just in, normal conversation, I've dropped that because of the samyama practice. The vibration of it is ultimately detrimental. It inspires ugly visuals. Whereas if you use more beautiful words, like the word beautiful, love, grandeur, glory, grace, love, I might have said love twice, but that's a really good one, then your emotional state as you go through the world changes because you are consciously choosing words with a frequency, a vibration that you like and that you enjoy. So ultimately all words, however, they become more wisp-like. All words are apparently transient. Again, this Buddhist word, I think it's a Pali word? Maybe I'm getting that wrong. But this very common Buddhist word called anicca, impermanence. And once you drop into the state of the great peace, coming back to that now, you can notice that everything, even the negative, the so-called negative vibrations, the heavy vibrations, the heavy emotions, the heavy words, they come out of this beautiful peace. It doesn't matter if you're focusing on a positive word or a negative word. If they drop away and you notice the impermanence, you notice they drop to the same place. And this place is very beautiful. You could call it nirvana. You could call it a samādhi, the great peace, the great bliss. And your identity can drop into that. And another word you can use is the eternal fountain of youth, because an endless, infinite amount of energies can come from this ocean of bliss and go back to this ocean of bliss, this great perfection. So it doesn't matter if you're hearing a positive word or a heavy word, both of them still come from a perfect, deep ocean of love, a great perfection, and they are just going to come up for a short while and then disappear back into this great perfection. So it doesn't really matter on the outside what's going on, because deep down, the substrate of all content is this great perfection. Now, I've made another video on that just earlier, the video before this, so you can sort of check that out if you want more clarification on that topic of the great perfection. But either way, we realize that all words, all perceptions are transient, but at the same time we become more and more empowered to choose the beautiful aspects, the beautiful vibrations that we want to choose. We become liberated. Consciousness can experience what it wants rather than being dragged through life by a thick veil of emotions. So, yes, I would recommend, if you've never gotten started with this topic, psychedelics can be a great way to unlock this ability, you could say, for the first time. And you could take any sort of psychedelic. Maybe for this particular case, a visual psychedelic could be more beneficial than something like 5-MeO-DMT. So maybe something like LSD or magic mushrooms or even NN-DMT. You could take a responsible dose of that and then sit in a meditative posture and choose one word or two words and really feel them. I recommend the words grace, harmony, love, wholeness, power, strength. All of those things are really, really good words to do samyama on, but this can be applied to all of life. So I hope this makes sense to some people. I hope you take this up, this practice. It's not very commonly talked about, but it's very, very powerful in empowering you. And I hope you can use this power to better serve, to better be a fountain of youth, to be a fountain of love to those around you.